We come into your presence with expectancy.
Hey, you good?
I'm good. Yeah, that's excellent.
It's really cool to be here, Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, well, we were talking during the week. When was it? Thursday?
Yeah.
I think it was, and I just put that to you, and straight away you were onto it. And you were telling me about some of the experiences that you were aware of.
Yeah.
And so I thought, right, great, if I could get you into the show. Just to add to the discussion, I thought that would be really good. From an African continent perspective. And Del, yourself?
Yeah, I'm glad you told me this morning.
Well,
sorry, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare.
Well, I know
I'm here.
You're ever ready man, so I could always rely on you. And you always have a lot to say about everything anyway, so I know what you're like.
Looking forward to
but yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, you got me fired up because it's kind of really close to my heart. You get what I mean? And I think the title is right. When we start talking, you guys will get to know what we're talking about, and you're gonna have your side of the story too.
Okay. Well, look. Before we get to that, we're going to play Stormzy and Blinded by Your Grace. For those who have been following Minister B on Facebook over the last, I think about 2 or 3 months now, if you go onto my Facebook page, you'll see a picture of Stormzy's album towards the bottom of my Facebook page. And what the picture depicts from his album is the same as the Lord's Supper. When they got the table and all the disciples are sat there and Jesus is sat in the middle. Exactly the same things being depicted. However, it's all in black. Everyone's wearing black. The background is in black. The table is spread with a black tablecloth, and everybody apart from Stormzy has got a balaclava on with holes cut out for the mouth and the eyes. And it's a really interesting image to look at. Go on there, have a read. Just have a look at my comments. It would be interesting to hear what you think about that as well. But anyway, in regards to his song,
Coming out of that relationship.
Right.
Nothing wrong with interracial relationships, but there's a lot wrong when the father has no intention of staying.
Right.
So one leaves without sharing the other side of the culture, so a child is left half full.
Yep.
Rather than having two advantages from either side.
But would you say in that sort of situation, that might be kind of like two-sided in that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that the lady involved in the relationship might be looking for somebody that she feels maybe will be able to take care of her financially? Do you think there's that dynamic within the whole thing as well?
I think in every relationship, everybody's looking for somebody to fill a space.
Yeah.
And everybody intends the space to be filled for the term of the responsibility. And once a child comes into the relationship, the responsibility is heightened. So when one party has no interest of what they have created, it is an unfair responsibility to the other. So the fact that a woman wanted somebody who could look after her doesn't mean a man is absolved of the responsibility.
Right.
That wasn't my biggest bugbear. One of the big bugbears I had in Ghana was that there was a Ghanaian food called kenke, right? It's made out of corn. It's a very staple. Everybody has it. And the Chinese had opened the kenke factories in Ghana, and they were doing Ghana kenke and putting the indigenous out of business.
Oh, right, I see.
The indigenous, it's two-sided. The indigenous could learn about things like keeping to time and saying if your kinky is going to be ready at 6:30 in the morning, it's be ready. But suddenly, there are unemployed indigenous.
But within these factories, were the indigenous people being employed?
It would be great if they were, but they weren't. So suddenly, I'm very aware that the Chinese are very efficient in time management and stuff like that. So they come in and probably find a quicker way. Is it a better way of doing the same product? I don't know. But it is out there, and people are eating things that taste like what they've always eaten, so they go for it. And it's being made cheaper. So the local person who's been making it all her life and has been handing the skill over to their kids now is unemployed.
Okay, so what you're saying basically, there's some sort of disruption that's coming in on a local level, just in terms of some of sort of like businesses. That's been run by the locals, and the Chinese are coming in, seeing the opportunity, having the means to maybe produce whatever was being produced locally quicker, more efficiently, to time.
Yes.
And taking advantage of that and building themselves a business platform straight away.
There is a platform straight away, and it's the advantage of money rather than the advantage of money and technology rather than the advantage of know-how. So initially, it may sound that's really cute. I mean, if you buy your first kinky from the Chinese shop, you go, why isn't it cute the Chinese can make kinky? But when it gets to a while where everybody is buying from them, it means the local people lose out on something which has been going on for generations.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective on the whole story, and certainly one that I wouldn't have thought of before. Okay, Del, let's go over to you. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's look at it from the Jamaican or the Caribbean perspective now. What sort of things are you aware of, and what have you seen that's maybe caused you to be a little bit concerned, a bit worried, or maybe not? Maybe you think it's a really good thing.
Well, I think really the things I've seen is more or less the same as what you've seen.
Mm-hmm, yes.
We hear about all these roads that are being built across Jamaica by the Chinese government, etc. And their payment really seems to be land.
Right.
I know that they gave away, I think it was 1,200 acres of like prime land, coastal, north coast land, for them to build hotels on, Chinese hotels, etc. To be totally honest, I don't see it as such a bad thing.
Okay.
Because it's bringing so much work.
But is the work going to be work that's going to be carried out by the local people, or are we talking about work that's being done by the Chinese in terms of all these massive construction projects that the indigenous population aren't able to buy into?
I can't answer that question because I don't know.
Okay.
But what other choices do they have? I mean, Jamaica is in such a massive debt. I think it's $17 trillion in debt of. How do they clear that kind of debt? Right,
yeah, and one statistic that I did read recently was that poverty has doubled in Jamaica since 2007. I'm not sure exactly how they measure it, but whatever indicators that they use to gauge poverty in Jamaica, and I bet you poverty in Jamaica is very different to poverty in the UK. We will know that, but poverty has doubled since 2007, which is sort of like just slightly over. So there's a situation. There's something that's going on in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean as well. And in fact, I put out a little video on WhatsApp, and I got something really interesting back from someone, and the person said the same thing was going on in St. Vincent as well. Yeah. But the person said in St. Vincent there was a lot of Chinese and a lot of Syrians. So I kind of text back and I said, I thought Syria was involved in a war at the moment, which you would have thought would have kept them fairly busy. Yeah. But apparently Syrians are also purchasing land in different parts of the Caribbean, which I thought was interesting.
I mean, they've been in the Caribbean for a long time, the Syrians.
Right.
You look at the prime ministers of Jamaica, the Manleys and Siaga and Bustamante and all these people from back in the 60s, they were all Syrians.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, they were all Syrians.
Right.
So they have been there for a long time.
All right. Okay. So it's interesting how this is starting to develop, and there's certainly two sides that I'm becoming aware of. One in regards to countries that have really been suffering from a lot of poverty for a long time. And usually when you have poverty, that will lead to crime and instability within the economy. And, whether or not we talk, I've spoken to my Asian friends and they say exactly the same thing. Spoken to my African friends, they've said exactly the same thing about sort of corruption on a local level. If you want anything, you've got to be paying for it on a local level.
Something just came to me as soon as you said your Asian friends, because China's actually doing the same thing in Pakistan.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Wow.
something they're calling it the Pak Highway.
Right.
PA for Pakistan and the C for China.
Right.
And the Pakistanis are really,
they're not happy about it.
They're not happy about it. They're in arms.
Right.
They're in arms about it. But a slight connection I see is that it seems to be everywhere where there's poverty and problems.
Yeah.
The Chinese are coming in to try and resolve it, but. Is there a larger agenda out there?
Bro, I couldn't. Now, you see, Africa, or the likes of the African countries and stuff like third world countries or the South, whichever way you choose to call them, have always been under a kind of a bigger agenda from a bigger power, right? Yeah. So the Chinese are not doing anything that Europe didn't do. But now that with all the knowledge and abilities out there, the countries or the government should be stronger, because I don't see any advantage whatsoever to any African country if China comes to build roads and they tell you the road is going to cost you $200 million or whatever, and that they bring Chinese people to earn the money in building the roads. So basically, you come to me, offer to do, instead of making it possible for people, indigenous people to earn an income and earn part of the $200 million, your people earn that money.
Yeah,
and so there is no advantage to us, and it's happened. I mean,
I suppose it's where the advantage actually kicks in, whether or not the Chinese are looking at it from the perspective. Our people know how to build roads. They've been building roads in China. They do a fantastic job. You just look at the buildings that we have in China. 1 minute, the buildings that we have in China, it's more efficient and for them to take and cost effective to take these people, their own workers, no language barrier, across over to the Caribbean, do what they got to do in the Caribbean. Now, once these resorts are built, then maybe at that point, I don't really know for sure. I'm just surmising. This is where the Jamaicans or the indigenous population will then get the jobs working in these resorts and so on. I don't know. Maybe that's the plan.
If every time a road needs to be built in Africa or the Caribbean, we have to bring China to build it. Whereas Africa and Caribbean learning to build own roads. So in the process, every time for example, the National Theatre in Ghana is an absolutely stunning building, beautiful building. I went there, I did a couple of plays there. Mm-hmm. And then I was talking about some lighting, and I go, we can only get light fixtures from China.
Right.
So it had been created as a gift to Ghana, which is beautiful, but it was also closed off in that any parts that needed working on needed to be imported from China.
Right.
So basically, you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah. It's a business, isn't it? And China's there's got to be something in it for China. And I suppose when we look at the issues and the problems that we have in the Caribbean, I can speak for the Caribbean. I know the Caribbean far better than I know Ghana, and some of the sort of horror stories that we hear coming out of the Caribbean. In fact, it was maybe a couple of months ago, the army was sent out on the streets to sort of quell a lot of the gang violence that was going on in the sort of resort part of the island, which I thought was really quite interesting. If the gang violence was going on in the south part of the island, I'm not sure that the troops would have been deployed so quickly, but where there's tourists and so on, the government have got to act really, really quickly. Adele.
Can I just ask a question? Why do we think the reasons are that the countries are in these positions that other countries have to come in and do this?
Right.
Or feel the need to come in and do this? What's the reasons?
Okay,
we do need to look at that.
Okay, let's hold it right there. Let's go back to the music just for a sec. Look, I want to dedicate this track to my lovely wife and also to my sister, Pauline. Now, I was going. Where were we going? Oxford, I think it was. A week or so ago, and they played this. I said, Bert, listen to this, just listen to the words, and so I did. It's from a guy called Peter Spence, and they wouldn't allow me, they wouldn't even let me take the cassette out of the car. I finally got cassette. Yeah, well, you wait till you listen to the tune. I got Del and Yao just laughing at me because I mentioned the word cassette.
Wow.
It's old. This is old school. But look, old school or not, it's a great track.
Once RMK to that, it seems there's an agenda, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but there's an agenda that seems to get an advantage in Africa being constantly poor and always coming begging. Now, Africa has always been in this kind of, some African countries, or lots of African countries, have always been in this kind of situation where they happen to get expertise from outside. Mm. And every time that kind of expertise has been brought in, there's been serious manipulation.
Right.
So, for example, what China is doing to Africa is nothing else. It's exactly like what Britain, Spain, every other Western country.
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure that we can really say that. Not yet. I think if we look back in history, there's a particular situation where, even though you can't justify what went on, in a way, what went on is understandable under the circumstances. Let me explain what I mean by that. Now, a lot of countries from the West were going across to Africa and enslaving a lot of our people and conquering nations and so on. The Dutch were doing it. The Germans were doing it. The English were doing it. The French were doing it. The Portuguese were doing it. The Spanish were doing it. All right? Now, let's decide, for example, just for argument's sake, the English decide, you know what, we don't want to get involved in any of that. The implication for England as a country is that they're not going to benefit from the proceeds of slavery. And if they don't benefit from the proceeds of slavery, then they're not going to be able to develop their armies and their countries the same as the French are doing, the same as the Spanish are doing, the same as the Germans are doing, the same as the Dutch is doing, putting them at a disadvantage. So it's almost a situation whereby, without excusing what was done, it's almost, well, if we don't do it, they're going to do it, and if they do it, they're going to get rich. And I wonder if we are looking at a similar scenario here today, where the world powers are looking to project military might across the globe, and it's a case, if we don't do it, then we know what the Russians are going to do it, and if we don't do it, the Americans are going to do it. So, you know what, we need to do what other nations are doing. I wonder if that is the dynamic in all of this argument as well.
The bone that the big dogs are fighting over. In the process, nobody works. Nobody seems to care about what happens to the bone. Everybody's trying to land grab in Africa because it suits their agenda for the moment. And Africa is turning to China, for example, to have their roads built, because when they turn to the West to have their roads built, it costs more.
Right.
You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So Africa is trying to deal with its own African countries. Sorry, I don't like saying Africa because there are 52 countries.
It's a big place. Yeah, it's a big continent.
Which week it is. But Africans are saying, well, if we have to pay 50 quid to get something, then why don't we go to the guy who charges 30 quid? Mm. Some of the big furore about the Chinese presence in Africa is brought up by the West because they have lost a client who used to pay them more money.
Right.
There are some advantages in that the roads actually do get built. That is not an issue at all.
Okay. But so what part of the issue and where this argument is starting to take us is just in regards to the benefit that possibly could come back to any one of our countries in the future. All right, and the kind of benefits. So, if we were to look at Jamaica, for example, because one of the questions just before the song was, why are these countries in the position? And if I was to take Jamaica, for example, I know that Jamaica is well and truly hamstrung in regards to money that it owes to the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
All right, well and truly. And when these monies are loaned, quite often where these countries really need to spend the money, they're not allowed to do so. They're not allowed to do so.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult circle to square.
I mean, it's like I was saying to you before, you know, the years between 1953 and 1963, Jamaica had the fastest growing economy, I mean, of any developing country in the world at that point.
Yeah.
And it stopped at 1963.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the reason for that is because basically what had happened was that Jamaica was doing so well that they were offered a loan.
Right.
Now that loan was 9.5 million, but the stipulation was it had to be spent on education, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it had proved itself actually before 1953, which was the reason it got to that point, because they'd spent a lot of money on the colleges in Jamaica, the technical colleges.
Right.
And the graduates had come out, and, you know, within 3 years of them doing this, they'd taken over the whole of the bauxite industry.
Right.
Within Jamaica themselves.
Really?
They started controlling it, became management.
Right, I see.
And these were the graduates from, you know, like Kingston Technical, St. Elizabeth Technical, these colleges.
Right.
But in 1963, they were offered this loan to be spent on education, but it was the way the money was spent.
Right.
Right? And if you look at any graphs, you can look at Jamaica and Singapore going up, and they were growing exactly the same.
Sure.
From 1910, 1920, 30, 40, 50, 60.
Yep.
And then it stops. Jamaica stops bang on at the end of 1960.
Right.
And Singapore just carries on rocketing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the reason is that loan.
Right, so that was the start. That was the start.
That loan for 9.5 million.
Which doesn't sound a lot nowadays, but
no,
in what?
But what had happened was they only spent 4.5 million on the schooling.
Okay.
So where did the rest of that money go? But what had happened just before that, there was a commission set up that allowed like the different parishes to actually choose the contractors.
Right.
For the schools.
Okay.
So I would pick you as my best friend.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go way over the amount.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd go way over the time, and there was a lot of interest.
Right.
So basically, by the end of the 1960s, what they owed was no longer 9.5 million. It was something like, I think it was 21 million or 17 million, because they'd gone so far over budget.
Right, okay.
And that's where the debt started from that point, and it's never gone down since then. So it's interest on top of interest on top of interest. Yeah. It's gone into the trillions.
I think what this whole discussion is really is starting to show me anyway, gentlemen, is just in regards to us really understanding our history well. And being able to relay that history back to our children. So, you know, there's a saying, if you don't know where you come from, you can't really control where you're going to, because you've got no connection with your roots or where you're actually coming from.
I mean, look at Africa, how Africa was dissected into countries. It is the most wicked, deliberate structure on the planet. You get me? Look at Ghana, for example. Part of the Akans are from Ivory Coast. Part of the areas of Ghana are also from Togo. Part of the Ashantis enter other regions. So the country is divided in such a way that the people within the alleged new borders really have no loyalty to each other. So they're working on a tribalistic agenda. The same way, I mean, as strange as that may seem, the Scottish National Party disagrees with the British government on several issues.
Yeah, because
it's a kind of tribalistic agenda.
National
but in Africa,
issues.
At times I wonder if those lines were drawn deliberately to constantly promote discord.
Well, I think that's probably part of it. You know, you've heard to say in divide and rule. I think that's definitely.
It was divided and ruled badly. And unfortunately, when it comes to the loan agenda, when the loans come in, the caveats attached to the loan are unbelievable. Yeah. So Britain may give, I'm just plucking figures out of the air, or may give Africa 40 million to build schools, but they have to buy books from Britain, they have to buy equipment from Britain. So the loan or the gift or the grant that has been given actually goes to employ more Brits than it actually does Africans.
That's so true, because I remember somebody saying to me Jamaica had to buy bananas from America. That was
Jamaica buy bananas.
Yeah, they had
You
to buy
having a-
bananas from America, and that was part of the deal at the time.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Because what happens, I would imagine, everything goes on to sort of like the international market.
Yeah.
So it goes from Jamaica to the international market and then purchased from there back again. So I can understand how that could be the scenario. Jamaica's, that's definitely like selling rice to the Chinese, isn't it? To sort of coin a phrase.
China has a cloud to tell you, take that rice out of my country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one time historically, I think when Britain got involved in China, it was gunpowder diplomacy, where they forcibly sold opium to the Chinese. They had no option there. And right now, Africa is going through its own gun diplomacy, where things are, or the Caribbean, where things are being sold to you, but what you sell back is only raw materials, which has no value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of the things, if cocoa was developed processed to a certain level before it was sold, or coffee was roasted to a certain level before it was sold from Africa, the income to Africa or the Caribbean would be quite exciting.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that's not allowed to happen, and that does not happen. I don't think it's just the stupidity of our leaders. It is because of the situations they've been coerced into. They've signed contracts that at times I wonder if they actually read the contract.
Right, I think quite it's interesting because I'll read just a quick article that I've got here, and then we'll go to another track. And this article, it goes back to 2014, and it says during a visit to Beijing with her ministers, that's the then Prime Minister Portia Simpson, earlier this year, the Prime Minister announced a project which would dwarf the road on both sides of the coast. That's the road that's just been built in Jamaica from the north to the south. It involved the Chinese building a 1.5 billion deep water container port on the islands in Jamaica using dredging and land reclamation to accommodate a mega ships coming through and expanded Panama Canal. But for islands, which is called Goat Island and Little Goat Island, are internationally protected ecological sites, homes to threatened species of birds, fish and reptiles. Donna McCauley of Jamaica Environmental Trust said that the plans would involve the destruction of Goat Island, including wetlands, coastal reefs and the largest remaining area of intact dry limestone forest in Jamaica. It was being pursued, she said, with no discussion or transparency. The details of the project have, however, been released. No plans have been put forward publicly, and we have had to access to information through. And we have had to use access to information laws to get what details we have. Our concern is that this is an environmentally protected area. Its environmental importance was protected by law internationally and by the government of Jamaica. So to turn around and announce in Beijing that this port was being planned before any discussion was held with anybody in the region makes a mockery of their environmental protection. Now that's quite deep.
So essentially what they're saying is that there was a piece of land.
Yeah, there's Goat Island, which is an island off Jamaica, small island, and Little Goat Island, and these two sites have been designated for I think they call it a deep port, so large containers can actually dock close to Jamaica. Now, from what this Diane is saying, it's going to totally obliterate these two islands, and these two sites are protected internationally.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing that's really annoying her from the Jamaica Environmental Trust is that there's been no discussion. Yeah. And the first thing that was leaked out about it was during a visit by the Prime Minister to China. No discussion.
So who was selling the land?
Well, the Jamaican government.
Well, the Prime Minister, okay.
So it's the project is going to be run by China. It seems, from what this article is saying, that the Jamaican government have given them the go-ahead to do it. But what this lady Diane Macaulay is saying, that the 2 designated areas are environmentally protected, both in Jamaican law and in international law, and that's been totally overrun. Totally overrun. So we're kind of starting to build a picture of what's going on here. However, I suppose the backdrop is Jamaica is in a bit of a state at the moment.
17 trillion is a lot.
That's a lot of money. How can you dig
a small island.
for a small island? How many people there? 1.5 million people, maybe. Yeah, it's the workforce is 1.5 million. It's a small Caribbean island. And what does the future hold for them in terms of being... And what we see in Jamaica as well, and you know, Dal, you would have known about it, just in terms of the violence. We've got generations now. I mean, I'm 2nd generation, my children are 3rd generation. And for all intents and purposes, that link with Jamaica is almost severed, I would say. You know, I've been there a few times, but certainly not comfortable enough to say, well, you know what, I think I could make Jamaica my home. And that's a shame.